Hi, my name is Eric Swanson, and I'm the VP of Product Marketing for Checkmarx. And today we're going to be talking about software security for DevOps and beyond. We work in a world that's driven by applications. It's driven by software and code. As we see in the market today, there's more and more code, more and more projects, and more software that's being driven that drives digital transformation for organizations. For example, GitHub recently announced that they actually have 199 million GitHub repositories. An additional piece of research that I was reading talked about how by 2023 we'll have 27.7 million developers. And so these are just a couple of examples of how much the development community and the developers are actually driving innovation forward. The emphasis is being placed on building software, building applications that drive business forward. As those developers are working and building those applications, they're not only utilizing in-house technology and in-house code that they're creating, but they're also leveraging open source technologies. They're leveraging open source libraries and open source technologies to continue to innovate and reduce the time that they need to bring those applications and software to market. And time is critical for organizations. It can mean competitive differentiation. It can mean customized user experience and increased revenue. And so as we see these organizations transforming their businesses from traditional brick and mortar or traditional business models, they're using software and applications to do that. And all of that is built around code. One thing for us to look at is how these enterprises have changed the way in which they're building software in these applications. Traditionally, applications have been very monolithic, housed in a data center, and have been fairly rigid in their architecture. Now leveraging cloud-native technologies and rethinking how these applications are built in order to be fast to market, in order to be flexible and provide a customizable user experience, the applications and their architectures are changing as well. They're moving from that monolithic architecture to a microservices-based architecture that's built around container technology, infrastructure as code technology, and essentially at the foundation of that, it's been built around microservices. And so it's moving from more of a hardware-based and software-based model strictly to a code-based and software-based model going forward. But with that change and that new speed to market being the focus for organizations, there comes increased risk. And so as you see, as the software becomes more and more complex for a company, there's an increase in that those companies are pushing that code to production with additional vulnerabilities, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly. In addition, the developers, their primary objective is to move fast. It is to release new features, new functionality for organizations to be able to monetize or provide a customized user experience. And unfortunately, developers with that focus, there is not necessarily an emphasis on security. And so they lack that foundational education to be able to find those vulnerabilities throughout the software development lifecycle. And with that speed, as I mentioned earlier, thinking about what that speed actually looks like, organizations like Facebook, and if you think about them as an example, or Android, they're pushing releases constantly thinking about how to release new functionality. And that speed to market presents friction with security. Security is about managing risk and knowing what those risks are. And that becomes a point of friction between development and the security teams. And so that's something that we need to address as a market going forward, and organizations need to address within their developer and security teams. And what we see from that is attackers are taking advantage of that. a new vulnerability that's introduced, after an application has been pushed to production, after an application has been released to market. If that's not caught early and often enough, it's very expensive to fix, and an attacker is taking advantage of that. They're scanning for those vulnerabilities in applications. They're looking for those weak points within an organization, and they're finding them, and they're finding out ways in which they can exploit them. And as I mentioned earlier, security has been a follower from the development world. If we take a technology like web applications, we see here in this example that security has been a laggard in terms of building solutions to address these new technologies. And so it's really important for security teams to understand where developers are focused in order to be able to understand the solutions that they can provide to be able to secure against these new risks and these new technologies that are being used by organizations today. So really we need to understand the developers and where they're going and the new technology to be able to build solutions to address those risks. And so if you think about things like infrastructure as code, moving from traditional network services, hardware-based solutions to more code-based solutions to build those applications and build the infrastructure that's there to support those applications. This is where we just see that transformation continuing to occur. Developers are using infrastructure as code templates, the solutions for that around cloud infrastructure protection. As I mentioned earlier, from a security standpoint, we need to understand what it is that's coming next and how we secure that. As I mentioned earlier, applications being hosted on traditional hardware, virtual machines, now moving to containerized solutions, Kubernetes, Docker-based containers. Those are just emerging technologies that organizations are continuing to explore as they think about moving away from these monolithic applications to more of a microservices-based architecture. These containers offer so much flexibility and functionality for organizations to be very focused on features within a large application, to innovate at a very small level. But it's still, if you don't manage these containers from a security standpoint, more and more risks are introduced. Once again, and just to kind of continue to address the point, going from a monolithic application to a microservices-based application, to even thinking about API security. Everything now, it seems as though, is based around APIs and the connectivity between APIs and those different applications and connection points and endpoints is where the market is moving. And so from a security standpoint, knowing how you're architecting your applications going forward, what technologies that developers and the tools that the developers are using gives you an opportunity to work with your development teams and coach them on how to address these risks that we're seeing fall within the development lifecycle. And so what does that look like? What does that solution look like when you're thinking about moving away just from tools to address these security challenges? And so the way we think about it at Checkmarx is we want to look at the software development lifecycle. We want to look at the end-to-end from all the way from the developer's IDE environment all the way out through runtime. And within that software development lifecycle, where are those vulnerabilities introduced? Where are those risks introduced? And so when we think about this, we want to take it from the perspective of how the developers are building and the tools that they're using. Understanding what IDE environments they're using, understanding what SCM or source code management solutions that they're preferring to push that code to, knowing what CI/CD tools that the software teams are using. All of that presents an opportunity for security to be involved in governing that process. When we think about governing the security or software development lifecycle, it can't be an approach of putting up gates and blocks because developers move quickly, they're being empowered and able to move quickly. It's about meeting them in the tools that they're using and having an almost transparent experience for the developers to be able to push that code to the next phase in the development lifecycle. For security and AppSec to be able to run those checks against that code to find those weak points. It's about even shifting the security earlier in the development lifecycle to enable for those vulnerabilities to be found earlier and remediated earlier prior to runtime. But then once those applications are being run in a security environment, how do we continue to scan those applications for those vulnerabilities? And so as we think about the future of software development and security, it's about ensuring that there's governance throughout the entire software development lifecycle, and that we're working as security professionals with our development and operations teams to make sure that we are working together in training and addressing all of those different risks that are proposed throughout that development lifecycle. And so this is just how we think about at Checkmarx the way the world works and how we help our development teams to mitigate those risks to those applications. So I just wanted to thank you very much for attending this session. I really appreciate the time, and have a great day.